Today, let's talk about clouds in Blender. The most common way that people add clouds into their scene in Blender is by using an image as a plane, specifically a PNG, where just the cloud is showing up and the rest of the image is transparent. This works fine. It's probably the easiest on your GPU. The second most common way to put clouds into Blender scene skies is by using volumetric shaders. That being said, I ended up taking the classic volumetric shader, adding a noise to it, and creating this wonderful asset that gives you all of the manipulation that you need with just a few sliders. So let's dive into not only what this does, but how I made it. So here is the node group that I have made, and I have all of the controls put onto this node group that you might need in order to change the style of clouds that you have in your sky. The clouds themselves are just a cube, kind of a rectangle technically, and I have put a bunch of nodes in that you can use to make clouds look realistic. So let's go down the list of controls we have here. Starting with density, the darker that you make your value, the more transparent your clouds will be. Again, density makes sense. The color will change the color of the volume, which will add an opposite color effect to whatever color you choose. So if you set it to green, it'll make your clouds refract purple. If you set it to purple, it'll make your clouds refract green. This can be used to set kind of a tone for your sunset. If you want to add a little bit more pink into your sunset, you just send the color over to green. If you want to add a little bit more yellow into your sunset or orange, you add it in a little bit more blue. We also have anisotropy. The higher the anisotropy, the more dark or dense the clouds will get, the closer they are to a light source. So that's the way anisotropy works with all volumes. It will disperse light a lot more closer to a light source and will be less visible farther away or in shadow. This is just another control I've included. And so the lower that you take your anisotropy, the more visible and even they're going to be across the whole spectrum of light. Personally, like having my clouds at around 820-ish. It just seems to be the most realistic for me. And I like to have my density up a little bit higher just so you can see the clouds. The next is cloud seed. So this one's actually pretty cool, and we'll zoom in a little bit just so you can see a little bit better. The cloud seed is going to just change the noise, and that's all it's doing, but because everything is noise driven, it is going to change your clouds. And this can just be cranked. Think of it as a seed number. It's not you can take this up to, 800, and it's not going to make it harder for your computer to render. It's just changing the seed value of the clouds if you don't like the look of the clouds that you have. Moving down to cloud scale. This is again just the scale of the noise. So the more that you add to this, the smaller your noise is going to be, which means all of the little bits of white and black that are making up where the clouds are and where the clouds aren't are going to get more and more detailed and smaller. And if you drag the cloud scale down closer to 0 or 1, the bigger the clouds are getting with less detail. So that's something to keep in mind. Cloud detail is the lacunarity. And so what that's doing is it's adding another displacement over your regular noise texture. And that is going to add micro details into the clouds without making it really difficult for your computer to render, right? So instead of including the actual noise detail level, I included the lacunarity, which does kind of the same thing. If we take this cloud detail down, you'll notice that the clouds actually start turning into big blobs. And there you go. It's a big blob. So I keep this up pretty high, and that's adding in a bunch of little extra noise to displace the original noise that's on there. And the last is the distortion. So if you're used to the noise node, you're going to recognize the distortion makes everything kind of wavy and wonky. That's how I'm getting cloud swirl. So we're just using some noise, and very small changes in this will add pretty big amounts of swirl to your clouds, and changing the seed will also help that kind of maybe look a little bit better. But the nice thing about this is it's all controllable and it's all animatable. And so you can have your cloud seed be changing, your cloud direction be changing, and cloud swirl be changing. And so it just gives this very dynamic look to clouds without too much render issues, at least from what I've noticed. Seems to render pretty well. And then last but not least is that location. The nice thing about having access to location is you can just get a regular cloud movement over the course of whatever animation you're trying to make. Or if you have a seed that you like, but you want one of the clouds in the background to be a little bit more overhead, you now have control to do that without having to move your entire object, right? It's just a simple mapping node is all it is. And so that is an overview of this cloud generator that I've made. One thing it doesn't do is those really bulbous clouds with that you'll see like right before thunderstorms. This is a very wispy cloud generator. I know that there's probably a way for me to make one that is more bulbous, but I haven't gotten there yet. So I actually stumbled into this whole setup as I was just trying to figure out mist for the water down here, and it ended up looking like clouds, and I was like, let's run with it. So let's go check out all of the nodes that I made in order to get this generator going. And it's really not that many. I was actually pretty surprised at how simple this node structure was. So what I have going on here, and all of these that are coming out back to the group input, those are just the dials that I just showed you. So you can disregard those. So what we really have right now is the cloud location, which is just a vector mapping node plugged into a noise texture, and the noise texture is going into a color ramp. I'm going to start shift clicking on these so you can see what it's actually doing. So this is the noise that I'm using. We did just make some changes to it, so it has some distortion and it has some other things that we changed on it, but that's fine. So this is the noise texture that I'm using for the clouds. It's very simple. I have it going into a mix color node, and it's just mixing with black. And the only reason to do that is because there's no way to control this density in the actual group nodes. So in order to get the density into the group nodes, I had to plug my color ramp directly into this mix node. That's all that this mix node is doing. It is not useful in any other way. Really, what I would have is a cloud location, which is the mapping node, the noise into a color ramp, and that color ramp would be going straight into this multiply. And what is this multiplying with? So this down here is a mapping node as well, hooked into a gradient texture. And this gradient texture is set into a color ramp because I wanted to mask out where the noise was on this rectangle in a way that would make sure that the tops and bottoms aren't super flat, right? Because clouds don't get pressed up against anything usually, and so I wanted to make sure that the tops and bottoms of that noise is very wispy and kind of gradually falls off. And the way that I'm doing that is with a gradient texture that is mapped and set to a color ramp to clamp it down. The only area that you have the most density here is just in the center. Everything else slowly starts to wisp off, and that is what that is doing. You can clamp this down more if you would like to. Right now I have it on cardinal because it seems to be kind of the best, but you can also, I'm pretty sure, do linear as well, and it should work just the same, just fine. And these are just going in and multiplying with each other so that the noise is only showing up where that gradient map is. And that's it. That gradient map is a mask for my noise texture, and my noise texture is generating the clouds. The multiply goes out right into the density of this volume scatter, and then the volume scatter is plugging directly into the group output. But yeah, I am definitely pretty stoked on how this turned out. Again, it was an accidental stumble upon, and it turned out really good in my opinion. I think that it's a very useful asset that you can keep in your asset library when you're throwing clouds in the sky. It also, I do have a sunset scene kind of set up here, but let's raise the sun elevation here into the sky, and let's rotate this sun around here, get some different views going on. It does work like normal clouds. And if that's not dense enough for you, you can always come in here and raise up the density of those clouds to get a little bit more detail going on there. But it blows out where it's supposed to blow out. It lets light through where light's supposed to be let through. You can come down here, you can change color. Oh, I want to have the background of these clouds be a little bit more yellow, add some blue color into there. The way I look at the volume color is remove color from clouds. What color are you trying to remove? Go select that color and it'll add the other ones in. So yeah, you can really change your scene. You want it to be a little bit more of a sad scene, a little bit cooler, a little bit bluer. You can throw some blue in there and change your clouds that way. And of course, the amount of color that you're allowing in can be affected with the value here. I am adding in a couple other volume shaders to kind of get this bounce lighting that I have. I do have a volume scatter node that's plugged into this kind of area volume that we have. And then down here where the ship's at, I do have a third volume shader that's kind of the same as the cloud shader. I just have it very swirly and set to mist so that when we are looking at our ship and we set this elevation up higher, we have some nice mist in covering the ocean here, right in front our cliffs. Yeah, if you guys want to go pick up this shader, it's super useful and it's totally procedural. And if you know anything about nodes, I'm sure you could make it look even better. So go ahead and pick it up. It's up on Gumroad. I appreciate you guys.